I'm Natalie Palmer, and you're listening to Sweet Success.
You've just checked in to Sweet Success. Join me, Katie Klein, for exclusive conversations with hotel executives, hospitality leaders, and industry innovators. Together, we'll uncover the strategies and techniques these masters of hospitality relentlessly refine. Whether you're already in the industry or just starting out, tune in every week to unlock the secret to your sweet success. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Sweet Success. I'm your host, Katie Klein, and today I have the honor of welcoming podcasting royalty to the show, Natalie Palmer. Natalie is the host of No Vacancy, the podcast, a show that quickly landed in the top 1% of podcasts worldwide and was my guiding light when setting up my 2 vacation rentals. She's also the co-founder of Level Up Your Listing Summit, an incredible annual event that I have the distinct pleasure of speaking at this year, taking place March 9th through 11th, 2025. Natalie started hosting on Airbnb in 2017, a journey she says began by accident. But since then, she's become an absolute powerhouse in the industry. Natalie, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Katie. That intro is so kind. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
I love hearing stories of people falling into careers by accident. And that's something you've obviously said about your Airbnb hosting journey. What were you doing before you started hosting? Because it feels so intrinsic to who you are.
Yeah, I guess it was like the writing was in the stars. Like when I was younger and people asked like what you wanted to be when you grow up, I don't know what I even said. Like I was all over the place. I went to college and have a business degree, a bachelor's in business marketing. And I thought I was going to like climb the corporate ladder. I don't know why I thought this because I quit my corporate job after like 18 months post college. Like it was not for me. And then after that, I literally called myself like the queen of side hustles at the time. I don't think I've ever had like less than like 8 different income streams. So I was freelance wedding coordinator on the side. I was doing branding for brands. I was doing website design, social media management, literally like just random stuff. Like anytime somebody was like, "Hey, I need help with something," I'd be like, "I can do it." I was like a virtual assistant for some brands at the time, just like random things. And I started to learn how to like code to do like website development, even though I hated it, but I just was like trying to find my thing. And in that string of things, my parents had a second home in Big Bear, California. And just as my sister and I grew up and we weren't using it as much as a family, that's when I was like, you know what? I think I could list that place on Airbnb. I think it would do really well. So it was always intended to just be another one of my like side hustles. And I was like, "Hey, mom, dad, can I put this on Airbnb? I'll take a commission," and, like, basically co-hosting before I even knew what co-hosting was.
Mhm.
But my goal was actually only to ever host that listing for 1 week, the week between Christmas and New Year's,
Mm.
because in, Big Bear, we hate going up there at that time. It's so crowded and so busy that I don't even enjoy being there. But I was like, "That tells me that we'll probably get a pretty good nightly rate for that 1 week, so
Mm.
let's just list it this 1 week. We won't be here." And finally, when I got my parents on board, immediately it was like off to the races. We got our first booking within 45 minutes of me publishing the listing, and it was for $2,500. And my parents were just like, "Okay, so you are not stopping after New Year's. Like, let's see this through to the end of ski season at the end of March." So I kept doing it. And then basically by the end of that winter season, we had brought in enough that my parents put a down payment on a second property, and they were like, "You're managing this one for us now too."
Wow.
And it just, for some reason, hosting stuck. Like all the other side hustles just like slowly faded away, and this one just combined everything I loved. I love like scheduling. I had so much fun, like, optimizing like when turnovers are, like working with the cleaners, when things needed to be restocked. I loved the design process. I loved talking to guests. I loved welcoming them. I loved starting to like tweak with pricing and trying to like beat the Airbnb algorithm. I really enjoyed like the bookkeeping. It was just everything about it. I loved, like, the Costco runs for restocking things. I loved the home goods runs, like, everything about it just clicked for me, and slowly everything else faded away. More and more owners started approaching me, and they were like, "Hey, we see your place is always booked. Would you be willing to manage mine too?" So I just started co-hosting for other owners at that point, and very quickly, I ended up managing 10 properties. It was like the blink of an eye, and it happened.
I'm so impressed that you have been side hustling for this long because I feel like this is something I've just recently opened my eyes to. I think younger generations are already in tune with it. I overheard a conversation in a coffee shop the other day between two people who I'm assuming are Gen Z, and they were both like, I work here, but I do this on the side. And I just thought,
I love
wow,
that.
these kids, like, they already have their finger on the pulse, and it took me way too long to figure it out. So I'm very impressed with that. But it makes a lot of sense when I look at all of your skills now, of all the things that you did leading up. It's almost like it was all leading here to begin with. So,
Totally.
2017 wasn't that long ago, but in a lot of ways, especially in Airbnb world, it was a really long time ago. And I'm
Yes.
curious, like, obviously first booking within 45 minutes, and then subsequently enough to earn a down payment for another property. What was your strategy then versus now? Like, were you just doing iPhone photos and that was good enough? Or did you already have that kind of marketing secret sauce because of all the side hustles that led you here?
Okay, so I'll say yes to both questions. So, yes, to start, there was not as much strategy. Like, it was very much like down to the wire. I published that listing on December 22nd. So, my whole goal was to like list it the week between Christmas and New Year's. And I was really late. It took so much longer to get the place ready than I thought. So, by that point, I was like, iPhone photos will have to do. And I also think this was at a time that like people didn't have professional photos really on their
Yeah,
listings. So even within that, like, yes, I guess I did kind of scrap it together, but I do think I had just like a gut instinct on what to do. Like even with iPhone photos, like I was able to stage it a certain way and I edited the photos in my little iPhone app to just like be brighter and higher contrast. And I was still taking like a variety of photos, like some zoomed in detail shots and then some further out wide angle shots. Like I think I still kind of knew like what guests would want, even though it was lower budget at the time.
right,
As far as pricing, again, that was totally I had no idea what Price Labs was. That was totally a hunch where I was just like, "I know Big Bear is always mad crazy at this time,
right.
so I probably could get a good rate. Let's do 500 a night." And
Mm,
that was our first booking. It was 5 nights at 500 a night. So from there, there started to be a lot of, like, tinkering and, like, I think I can get more on weekends. I really think this is not rocket science, you guys. Like, a lot of, like, common sense of just, like, thinking about what you would book and what you would be interested in, and when you look at trips, like, think about when there is higher demand or when you're planning trips, and, like, that's a good hint you should bump prices a little bit. As you're taking photos, think about, like, how are people gonna use the space? Like, that's a good hint of how you should showcase the property, not just the wide angle zoomed out photos that should go on the MLS. Like, you're painting an experience here, that you're not selling the house. So trying to just get, like, more in tune with those, like, detailed shots.
It's so interesting what you're saying because, like we said, 2017, not that long ago, but also very long ago. What I'm really hearing is there wasn't the infrastructure around this business that there is today. You said Price Labs, obviously, an amazing dynamic pricing software that anyone can really sign up for their own personal listing. Obviously, photographers and influencers in this space, so many different
Yeah.
facets of it. Even people like yourself who work with Airbnb directly to teach people how to host,
Yeah.
how to set up their listing, how to optimize their listing, etc. You just kind of figured it all out on your own. Do you feel like it is rocket science today to stand out and it just wasn't then, or is it still not rocket science?
Okay. This is what I always say. So Airbnb it's not, I say it's simple, but it's hard. So it is hard work. Like it's not passive income. It is hard work that you have to be involved, but it's not complicated. Like it's very simple at the end of the day. I think that, of course, I'm not saying, like, you have to buy a mentorship in order to succeed, like, absolutely not, there's people figuring it out, but I will say today, it is more competitive than ever, regulations are tighter than ever, margins are thinner than ever, and there's more competition to stand out, and so I think now I also will say too, there's a lot more there's almost too many options out there. So, yeah, Price Labs, is great. There's also Beyond Pricing and Wheelhouse and Airbnb Smart Pricing, and every PMS has their own pricing. So, actually, like being able to know which one works, which ones are the best, how to use them, and get the most out of these softwares. Same with your property management software, whatever it might be. Same with your cleaning scheduler. Like all of those are great tools, but there's almost like too many of them.
Mm.
And I do think I mean, I wish going back that I had someone to hold my hand. Like, I did figure it out, so I'm not gonna, again, say that you have to pay for the course or whatever, but definitely helps. I'll tell you this, Katie, my very first year hosting, that entire calendar year, we made gross revenue 22,000, and I was thrilled with that.
Mhm.
Like, I was like, "This was just supposed to be a random thing that turned into this,
Right.
amazing." In year 2, that same first property made 45,000,
Wow.
so double, and in year 3, that property made 85,000, and now pretty much we've maxed out, like 85 is what that property can
Yeah.
generate, and I think back and I'm like, I was so happy in year 1, I was ecstatic in year 2 when I doubled. Year 3 was amazing, and now I'm like, "Great." I actually lost money in year 1 and year 2, if you think about
Right.
it. Like, I lost 60K on what I could have been making and another 40,000 in year t I lost 100,000. Like, if you wanna think about it that way of what I left on the table by not optimizing pricing correctly, by not being efficient, by not helping the algorithm. So, yes, you can scrape by, but I think if there's somebody that you resonate with, that you want their help and you want a mentor or you wanna listen to a podcast, like, do it. There's so much information out there that can help you.
And you really think it was that? It was the efficiency, the pricing, the algorithm
Oh,
optimization, rather
yeah,
than you guys did a
because
massive renovation and changed
no.
things. Yeah. Wow.
There was no renovation at all, we didn't add any new amenities. Also, this property, it's a condo, and so I'm actually very limited on what amenities I can add.
Yeah.
I know right now there's kind of the amenities arms race in the
Mhm.
short-term rental game. Everyone is outdoing each other with pickleball courts and hot tubs and game rooms and movie theaters. I can't do half of that. This is an 800 square foot condo. I have an HOA that is not gonna let me add all these, like, extra things outside. So it was all just tweaks with like better photos and being able to like lower expenses, being more efficient with my trip runs, certain settings on the back end, starting to charge for late checkouts, early check-ins, opening up for pets. There's just like so much you can do even within that. And that's one thing I really like to stress too. Like you do not have to go blow $20,000 on upgrades. There's probably just simple tweaks you could be making right now that will start to bring in 1 to 2 grand extra per month.
I want to talk about your mentorship program, but before we do, I want to get into a bit of your background because I think that really influences what your mentorship program is. So, if anyone listens to Natalie's podcast, one of the first things you learn about her is she manages 10 properties, as she just mentioned. She's also a 26-time Airbnb superhost. And you are a stay at home mom, as you call it, to your 3 young children. Obviously, I think this is super empowering, but it also makes me think about what the new definition of stay at home mom is, because we're going to talk about the other things that you're doing. You are still kind of side hustling. You've got lots of amazing projects going on.
Yeah.
You're really running an empire. So I think the old definition of stay at home mom maybe is changing. Not to say that either are good, bad, or anywhere in between, but what does it mean to you?
Yeah, you bring up a good point. Like, do I qualify as a stay-at-home mom anymore? I don't know. So, my listings themselves, I now manage that in 15 minutes a day
Wow.
max. And I just, as you guys have heard, I'm somebody I think I get bored very easily. I always want to move on to the next thing. So, pretty much once that was like running itself, I had to start the next project, which became my podcast. And now I run a um, Women's Summit, an annual Women's Summit coming up March 9th, 10th, and 11th in Phoenix, Arizona, which Katie, you'll be a speaker at. And that's called Level Up Your Listing Summit. And so today, way more of my time is spent on those things, on my podcast, planning the summit. I do coaching right now, which I really enjoy, and that takes a lot of time too. So when I say I'm a stay-at-home mom, I have a lot of support. This is my schedule. Monday, I have a sitter come to the house and watch my 3 kids from 10 AM to 4 PM. My husband gets home from work at 4, he relieves the sitter, and then I'm probably still working until 6 or
Mm.
7. So Mondays are full days for me. I get up with my kids around 7, so we have the morning
Yeah.
together. Tuesday, same thing, very similar schedule. Sitter comes to the house. And then on Wednesdays, I drop my kids off at my in laws and they take them all day. My husband picks them up on his way home from work and brings them in at the end of the day. Thursday and Friday, I try to take off. Like I'll maybe jump on a Zoom call during nap time, or that'll be like content days or something like that. So I really try to only work 3 days a week. Right before our summit, I probably grandma has to help a little bit more because I have more things to do as we're like leading up and I might have to work Thursdays, but pretty much Fridays I will always have off. And I don't know. I mean, I guess the way I define stay at home mom is just like the flexibility.
Yeah.
So even though I do have a sitter come and, grandma and grandpa take the kids 1 day a week, I have my son, he's 9 months old. He was in the NICU for 12 weeks last year when he was born. He was there for 3 months, and I dropped everything. Like, when that happened, I just was like, "Okay, the podcast has been pre-recorded. I'm good right now on episodes." It was post-summit season, so we were in a phase where we weren't planning the summit yet. And I just took a pause from coaching. I was like, I'm not going to open another cohort right now. And the properties, like I said, it's 15 minutes a day.
Right.
So I stopped everything. And there was no, I need to get my maternity leave extended. Like I need to, get PTO for my employer. Like I just stopped everything and I didn't check my inbox for 3 months.
Wow.
If my now he has a lot of follow-up appointments and stuff too with specialists all the time. So it's very much like, okay, Monday, I can't take Zoom calls this week. Like calendar's blocked off. My sitter will come here to watch the girls and I'm taking him to
Right.
appointments. So I guess that's how I define it. Yeah, 3 days a week from home I work and just that flexibility.
I think the flexibility has to be one of the most rewarding parts of seeing everything that you've built come to life, especially when you're going through something as challenging as that must have been with your son. I'm so happy to hear
Yeah.
that he's doing well now. I know you had mentioned before we started recording. So that just makes me so happy and also probably made you feel so proud that you had worked to build those systems and put that in place so that when something horrible happened, you were able to really be present and focused. And I think that's a
Yeah.
great segue into talking about your mentorship program, which the title alone is brilliant. It's called Host Like a Mother. Fantastic. And your tagline is helping moms achieve $10,000 months with Airbnb in under 1 hour per day. Tell us more about the program because that is just fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah. So, Host Like a Mother is my 10-week mentorship program. And my tagline is helping moms achieve 10K months in under an hour a day. And that's basically, that was born just out of that's what I do. So, 10K months through management. And it's taking me, like I said, about 15 minutes a day. And so, that's really what I want to just bring through there. One philosophy that I really like live by is I'm sure you guys have heard this, the Pareto principle,
Mhm.
like 20% of actions influence 80% of results and vice versa. I like live by that just with everything I do. And this was yesterday on my coaching call. We had a whole conversation about this. Right now, somebody was telling me that she has an inspector that comes to her property after every clean, which is great. I'm not knocking the inspector, but when we priced out how much she's paying per turnover for that person to come, and she's like, I've only ever had 5-star reviews because of this person coming. We kind of priced it out, and I was like, you know what? I get 5 4-star reviews a year, and they don't kill me. Like I'm still doing it, doing okay, and I don't pay an inspector, and that's saving me $25 per turn.
Right.
That adds up.
Mhm.
When you're doing 100 turns a year, that adds up. That's a good 2,500. And it also lets me let guests check in earlier because I'm not waiting for the inspector to come. So I can charge for early check ins. And when we broke it out, it was like, is it worth keeping
Mm.
this? And I mean, hospitality is extremely important, so I don't want you to ever, like, sacrifice that, but I was like, "I don't know if this, like, one detail, like, do you really need it?" And that's, like, really what I like to focus on is just we had another girl in our group who she's had the biggest headache with Verbo. Like it's not syncing with her calendars and it's just always causing issues for her. It was blocking dates on Airbnb that actually were open. And I asked her, I'm like, Brittany, how many reservations are you getting from Verbo a year? She's like, 5. I was like, we're done.
Yeah.
We're done with Verbo. Like, just we don't need it. You will get those 5 reservations in Airbnb and you've probably lost more money trying to make both platforms work and having the dates blocked.
Yeah.
So that's honestly my philosophy with everything is just like if there's any friction in my business that's not like producing enough inputs, like producing enough outputs, it's gone. I scrap it. Like I just don't have time. I've got 3 kids and other businesses, and I'm not going to
Yeah.
fret about these things that are like minor details.
I'm glad you brought up that Verbo example because it was something I was going to ask you about. I think I saw on your website or your social that you had said similarly you cut Verbo. And it was kind of this light bulb moment for me because right now I'm listed on Airbnb and Verbo. I'll save my opinions on the platforms for another day. But just like you said about the girl in your mentorship program, I would say 90, maybe even 95%. And for this year, it's 100% so far of my bookings are coming from Airbnb. And
Yeah.
part of that, I believe, of course, because I'm always going to blame myself, is I don't know the Verbo platform as well as I know the Airbnb platform, because I think Airbnb makes a concerted effort to make it really user friendly, not only for the traveler, but for the host. So part of
Mhm.
me is like, is it because I'm not putting in the effort to optimize my Verbo listing the same way that I am with my Airbnb listing? But at the same time, it made me think when I saw your post, I'm paying for a PMS, pretty much a property management software, so that my calendars are synced. So that when someone books on Airbnb, it automatically blocks my Verbo calendar. And then I started to think, well, if I'm not getting any real bookings from Verbo and I have this monthly expense, which is not cheap, just to block
Yeah.
the calendar, maybe I should be thinking about that as well and just kind of get rid of the PMS, get rid of my Verbo listing and just go all in. But I think one of the fears that people have is, and this is where you have a lot of the whole book direct movement happening both on the
Yes.
hotel and the rental side is, well, what if tomorrow a guest makes a false claim and my Airbnb listing is shut down overnight? Has that ever happened to any of your 10 properties?
No, I've never had it happen, like, seriously, knock on wood,
Yeah.
because this happens for the craziest things, and here's my response to that, because I think that that's the biggest pushback is, like, you don't wanna put all your eggs in one
Right.
basket, and I guess the way I feel is, like, okay, if, most people I talk to, 95% of bookings are coming from Airbnb, so if Airbnb shut down your listing tomorrow, it's still not like, "Oh, great, I have all this income coming in from Vrbo,"
Very
like,
true.
you still don't have bookings there. So, and I just think like the amount of effort, I mean, across my 10 listings, if I were to put all 10 of them on Airbnb, all 10 on Vrbo, all 10 on booking.com, all 10 on Expedia, I have now 40 listings I'm
Mm,
managing, not even including direct booking sites. That's
yeah.
crazy. And there are property managers and co-hosts out there with like 25 properties. That's easily over 100 listings you're now managing and tweaking.
Right.
And I mean, this is another thing I come back to too. Airbnb, whether we like it or not, and I know your show is focused on hotels, so if I'm going too far down a rabbit hole, just
Hospitality
cut
in
me
general,
off.
broader hospitality, broader travel industry.
Airbnb, whether we like it or not, has 80 million monthly visitors to their platform. Vrbo has 40
Mm,
million, so half. And then Booking and Expedia are even less than that. Those two are bigger in international communities, but US based, they have even less than that. And your direct booking site that no one has ever heard of, that's going to have even less than that. So my thought is always if you're not getting booked consistently on Airbnb, where there's 80 million monthly visitors, there's a deeper problem.
mm,
It's not that you need to now go list on another site with even fewer visitors. Like there's something we can fix with the listing right
yeah.
there. So that's my response to that. I am totally on board for direct booking though. If I were to pick two, I would say Airbnb and direct
Mm,
booking would be the two I would focus my efforts on. And with direct booking, my thing with this, again, back to the, 80/20 rule, make sure that whatever you're investing in direct booking is actually worth your
mm,
while because before you know it, it is so easy to sink $5,000 to pay a web developer and brand designer to build out a custom site for you. Next thing you know, you're paying a social media manager, you know, $1,000 a month or whatever to like manage this for you to actually drive traffic to your direct booking site. Then we're talking about paid ads from there. You're talking about having to get Google reviews and like build all of that up. There's additional softwares and insurances that you need, payment processors. A lot of people think like, oh, once I leave Airbnb and I go direct booking, I suddenly don't have any service fees to Airbnb. Okay, but you've incurred a lot more
Yeah.
fees. I'm happy to pay those service fees knowing that I get exposure to 80 million
Yeah.
viewers a month. Like, having to do that on your own is just substantial. So I just like to paint a realistic
Yes.
picture of direct booking, but I'm all for it. And Katie, I know you're like the queen of branding and PR. I just want people, if they're gonna do direct booking, like, please have a realistic, idea of what you're getting into.
Well, first of all, thanks for calling me the queen. I wouldn't say that, but even still, I feel the same way. Like, I feel like when I first started in this world of short-term rentals, and you guys do this so well about going away from this narrative at Level Up Your Listing, you get a lot of real estate investors who are talking about doors and they have got 100 properties and da, 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 and you're like, I gotta
Arf.
grow and I gotta grow fast and everything. And as I've kind of found my feet, I'm like, hang on, that's maybe not for me. I love the hospitality of it. I love everything that you said about talking to the guests and knowing why they're there and really making them have a special experience. But anytime someone would also say, like, what about direct booking? Are you building a strategy? Da, 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 da. I really just thought, like, are we forgetting why Airbnb is charging us a fee or Verbo is charging us a fee in the first
Yes,
place? Like you said, they have
yes,
80 million people there. It would take me a lot more than their 3% fee to attract 80 million
yes.
people to look at me. So I agree. I think people need to see both
Yeah.
sides of it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'm not opposed at all. Like, have fun, build out the brand, know that it's a long game. I think at the very least, like, create like a Lodify direct booking site. Like, those are really easy to just get up and running, at least when you have like repeat guests
Right.
or friends and family. But yeah, beyond that, like, it's a long commitment, and there is a reason Airbnb charges those fees. It's not just you do get a service out of it. Like, that's your marketing budget, is the way
Absolutely.
that I view it.
Absolutely. And just to close out on your mentorship program, I know that over 500 hosts have taken your course to date. It's amazing. What have you seen consistently that people are either surprised about by hosting their properties, or maybe what surprised you about launching the course in the first place?
Okay, so let me clarify. This specific mentorship, Host Like a Mother, I've had over 50 students in.
Got it.
I've had over 500. I have other courses too, my co-host and crush course, like mini courses. I have over 500 have taken the whole suite of courses. So
Wow.
I just want to clarify that. But yeah, with my mentorship program specifically, the problems that I'm seeing right now, the biggest points of friction, and this is so sad to say, it's honestly that people bought wrong.
Mm,
Like, that is really the biggest problem where there's a certain point where it's like the payments you're committed to, the monthly payments and, like, where you bought and the design decisions that were made, the location, the amount of tourism there, like, it's just not going to convert. That's probably, like, the biggest struggle I see, and that's really if somebody comes to me with that situation, I will steer them away from the program.
yeah.
Like, realistically, I'll say, "You need to talk about whether you should sell this one or convert to a midterm or a long-term rental, or if you're willing to, like, put in a pool or, like, invest a significant amount to, like, put in more amenities." Yeah, so those ones are really hard. If somebody comes to me with that, I will not even, like, take them to the program. Like, I don't wanna just take your money for that. But that's probably the biggest one that, like, there's just no easy fix for. Outside of that, I would say for people who I am working with, probably the biggest problems I'm seeing hmm, that's a good question. I would say just, like, more automations. You know what it is? This is if I had to sum it up in one thing, I think a lot of hosts are too emotionally tied to their property,
Mm,
and I think that that leads to a whole slew of problems, like, not being willing to be flexible on price and just, like, an emotional attachment, like, "I think my place is worth 350 a night." Well, if it's not getting booked at 350 a night, it's not worth 350 a night, even if you feel that way. So that I know holds people back. People who are like, "I just refuse," when we can see on the data that, like, opening up to pets would make a difference, and
mhm.
people are like, "I just don't wanna be pet friendly." I'm like, "Okay, so that's gonna cost you," you
Yeah.
know? The person who I'm trying to think. I have people who wanna grow, like, co-hosting businesses, and they will turn down clients because they're like, "Oh, it's my neighbor, and I don't want their listing to compete with mine." So if you're too attached to yours to where you're not willing to, like, grow and take other clients, that's gonna hurt you.
Yeah.
So if I had to sum up, or guest messaging, this is a big one too. Guys, the day that you give up guest messaging and like outsource that, like you just get your sanity back. But a lot of people are like, no one is going to message as well as I do. Like no one else can,
I'm
deliver
guilty
that
of that. I
hospitality.
will say that.
There you
I'm very
go.
like, I handhold them and I believe, or at least I've convinced myself that they are more forgiving of things because I've handheld them so well than if
Mm.
somebody else had. But you're right. Like at a certain point, it's going to hinder how much I can manage.
Yeah, which is perhaps true. Like, I mean, I will tell you, like, I was also that host who had 100% five-star reviews. And when I started outsourcing things and stepped back, my rating now is like 4.96 on the platform. So fucking what? Like, I would so take that 4.96 and still be a superhost and guest favorite
Right.
to just have my life back. Like, you can't convince me to care that much, like, about having 5.0. So that's, that's just where I come down on, like, yeah.
I love it. I love it.
I know this is a hospitality podcast, and here I'm telling people to, like, give up a little bit of the special treatment, but
Well, I want to go back to
yeah.
something you just said about people buying wrong. And I'm interested to understand how you determine they've bought wrong, that you would dissuade them from joining the program, and maybe how you would suggest that they make sure they buy right. Calling all short term rental hosts and real estate investors ready to turn your listing into a money making machine. Join me at the third annual Level Up Your Listing Summit happening March 9th through 11th in Phoenix, Arizona. It's the event where female hosts come together to learn, share, and level up their game. Use code Sweet Success. That's SUITESUCCESS to get 10% off your ticket at levelupyourlistingsummit.com. Tickets are sure to sell out, so act fast. Hope to see you there.
Yeah, you have to run the numbers. And actually, that's not even the full blanket answer because there's a lot of hosts crushing it where it's a deal that did not pencil in AirDNA.
Mhm.
The numbers technically didn't make sense. They went to a market where they were kind of the first of their kind. Everything in this market was grandma chic and just terrible quality photos. And now this person comes in with, a new build or a really nice reno, and they plan to like do the high quality photos and change it up, and those ones are just completely outperforming what the market could have predicted. So it's not even necessarily about running the numbers. I think it's just, and we talked about this earlier, like, do not buy a property without, like, there has to be a level of common sense of just would I book this? If you buy a house in Palm Springs without a pool, what are we doing here? Like, there's just, unless you now have the budget to put that in, that is not going to book. So I don't know, there's just stuff. It's a lot of like, here, let's take Palm Springs again as an example. If you're going to buy a small property in Palm Springs, a studio, a one bedroom or a two bedroom, my immediate thought would be, how many cute boutique hotels am I now competing with
Mm.
when I buy that size? I mean, Palm Springs is the mecca of like adorable little mid-century boutique hotels with concierge services and restaurants on site. You cannot compete with that with your one bedroom little house in there. So if that's the budget that you can play with in Palm Springs, only enough to afford a one or two bedroom, you can't go to that market.
Right.
What makes sense in Palm Springs is a place that can sleep 12 plus people. And now you have an actual group of friends that aren't going to fit in a hotel. And now you become a viable
Mhm.
option. So things like that, that just like, buying a property like that, like I can't add six bedrooms for you to like make it work. So that's one example. What else?
And going back to when you say about the numbers need to pencil, so essentially you're suggesting people go onto AirDNA, look at how much either the specific property or the area expects to generate annually, then look at what your mortgage payment would be, your insurance, your taxes, etc., like all of the kind of potential costs, and say, am I
Yes.
in the black or am I in the red? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, pretty much, and, I will tell you too, I'm really not a fan of the, like, top 10 lists. Like, every year, there's always AirDNA does it, whoever, everybody puts out the top 10 list of, like, these are the markets to invest in, and I just would not recommend you follow those at all, because what I've noticed, consistently, this is one I always see every year.
Mhm.
Vegas makes the top 10 list market. And this is my thought process with Vegas. If I am going to Vegas, the entire point of a trip to Vegas is to stay on the strip.
Yes.
Like that is the trip. I don't want to stay off site somewhere. Like I want to be in the hotel where I get all the resort amenities and I can just walk down to the casino floor and walk up and down the strip and go shopping. Like and what happens is they'll pull these it'll always make the top 10 list because they'll show like, "Oh, housing prices in Vegas are
Right.
low," so it makes the list, and tourism is extremely high, and how much money tourists are spending is extremely high. So there you go. Here's the formula
Right.
for a great, this is a market for a great short-term rental, and I'm like, "You're missing the entire point of why someone would travel to
Yeah.
Vegas." So yeah, that's where I think it's just a little bit of like, I don't know, I say common sense, but like really think through like, okay, if I was actually a guest, would if I'm traveling, if I'm planning a trip to Vegas or if I'm planning a trip to Palm Springs, what would I book? Like depending on which group I'm going with. And that has to guide the decision.
Yeah.
Like always go back to that and just like realistically, what would you book? Would you book your place? Sometimes you have to have a hard conversation with yourself and be like, no, I wouldn't.
It's such a good formula too to figure out like the amenities you're looking for as well, because I
Yes.
the Finger Lakes is a market that I'm interested in investing in. I had my
Mm,
eye on it for a while, and I thought I knew exactly what I was looking for. And then for this coming summer, we've booked a trip where we wanted to stay on the water in a house on the water. And obviously, we're looking at the lower side of the price point for the market just because of like our available money to spend, but it's still a lot of money that we're spending. And as we started looking at the properties that were available, all of a sudden I saw, you know what? Instead of just being on the water with a dock to jump into the water, some of these properties have like little shale beaches, which for my toddler is going to be way more appealing for her to get in the water that way than to have to jump in each time. And
yeah.
some of them had gates that could pull out around like the terraces and the balconies, which again, for young kids, I'm like, oh, that would actually be really helpful to have rather than having to make sure she's not running down the stairs when I didn't allow her to. So, just in doing that shopping procedure for myself, all of a sudden now I have things that when I'm looking for investing, I'm like, hang on. If I want to look for those pieces, or how can I add those pieces in? Another thing that came out was like,
Mhm.
ideally we'd have bedrooms on the same floor because I don't like the idea of being on a different floor from her in a house that's unfamiliar to me. So now all of a sudden I'm like,
Yes.
wow, my investment criteria has changed too, not just what I'm looking for this summer.
That's such a good point, and I'm a big believer, like so I know I said some properties just, like, can't work, but I do think a lot of properties that are not successful right now are just not leaning into the right messaging. So, like, one example I give and we can use this. So, probably, I'm guessing you started your search with places that have private docks, and it's just this thought of, like, "Oh, Finger Lakes, and that's what's gonna set it apart,"
Yeah, just
and
on the
then you
water.
had to start digging
Yep.
on the water, okay. And then you start kinda digging and you were like, "Wait, maybe like a beach with a gate." And I would really recommend that those hosts who have that, that they like put that in their title
Yes.
and really clearly in their messaging, like kid-friendly water access, and say like, "Oh, it's not a dock that your toddler will have to jump into. It's a beach where they can dip their toes, and we actually have a totally private gate, so it's also pet and kid
Yes.
friendly." Like you have to kind of reposition because a lot of people would see a beach and think, "Oh, no, I want a dock." Like, I wanna be able to jump off. So you have to, like, reframe how that can be a positive in their mind. So our properties, like I said, in Big Bear are condos. And that whole first year that I told you we didn't make as much as we ended up making, I think one big mistake I made was I was embarrassed that we were in a condo.
Mm,
Like, I always thought, "Oh, somebody's only gonna wanna book, like, the cute A-frame when they come to Big Bear." Like, they want, the cabin in the woods, like, that experience. And I was a little bit like I didn't hide it, like, I was very transparent, but it was like in my mind, I was like, this brings us down a tier." And what I did in year 2 is I realized after being there, we have trash removal, like, completely complimentary by the HOA. Other listings that are up in the hills and, like, up in the mountains, your guests have to drive trash down because the trash, trucks, the garbage trucks can't drive up these windy roads,
wow.
so you have to require that your guests take trash down to a public trash site upon checkout, and if they don't, you have to charge them because your cleaners will charge for that. So I was like, "That's a huge selling point for us that, like, yeah, you're in a complex, it's not as serene, but there's just literally dumpsters right there in the condo complex parking lot. Snow removal. We have our property manager will call in snow removal immediately when there's like 2 inches of snow, it's cleared. And these other properties that are higher up, they can get stacked and you need four-wheel drive access to get there. So it really became like all the messaging in my description and stuff now is like easy access, don't need four-wheel drive, EV chargers on site, like in the complex, not required to take your trash. And that like really became like a positive. Flat parking, like paved parking lot. So all of those things that I used to be like embarrassed about, I'm now like owning
Owning
it.
it.
So I think that there's a lot you can do if even if you don't have like the dream property, I still don't think maybe you necessarily bought wrong. Like if the condos were failing, and this is a case where I would say no, we just need to tweak the messaging a little bit.
Absolutely. You're kind of saying, let's identify who your target market is and speak to them more directly. And I
Yes.
know Will Slickers, obviously, founder of hospitality.fm, which both of our podcasts are on. He hates the
Mhm.
term guest avatar, but that's really it, right? It's like, who is your guest
Does he
avatar?
really?
He hates that term.
Why?
He's like, your guest avatar is you. And I think he's right to an extent,
Oh,
not
okay.
necessarily for everyone, because I'm sure some people have massive portfolios where, they have other properties that aren't for them. But I think probably the people who do the best is when you are the guest avatar, because like I was saying, and like you pointed out, like you wouldn't realize the shale beach is good for toddler swimming unless you had a toddler. So it
Yeah.
is interesting. But anyway, Will gives us a great transition to talk about your podcast, No Vacancy. As I said, when I first purchased our first vacation rental, my husband and I listened to your show all the time to really give us insight into like what we were doing because we had no idea. So tell us a bit about how the show began, when you started it, and maybe what's been the most surprising thing about hosting it now that you're 130 episodes in.
Yeah, I started that in a very, like, I don't know, dark place in my life, actually. So I know I told you about my son, my 9-month-old who was in the NICU, but I also had a very traumatic birth with my second child. My daughter, I had a placental abruption at 37
Oh God.
weeks, and it was if anyone doesn't know, it's basically like when your placenta like starts to tear, and so you'll have a lot of bleeding, and you can experience a partial abruption where you'll just like see some spotting, and they'll probably recommend bed rest. But I had a complete placental abruption just out of nowhere. Basically, it's like your placenta just wherever it's like rooted to and attached to your uterus, it's just like gone, like slides out, no longer connected. And, I thought that my water had broke because I had a huge gush, and then I looked down and I was covered in
Oh
blood.
my God. And
So,
that can be
we start
fatal to mom and baby, right? That's
Oh,
really
yeah. Oh,
serious.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we called the doctor and we're like, "Hey, we're on our way to the hospital." And I still thought that my water had broken, and I just was like, "Oh, some blood got mixed in with, like, the amniotic fluid,"
Sure.
because the sheer amount, Katie, it was literally if you took a 16-ounce water bottle and just, like, dumped it. Like, it was and it's tr that's 2 pints, I think. In the end, I think the human body has, like, about 4 to 5 pints. They said I lost 2 pints of
Oh my
blood.
gosh.
So, it was so much that I couldn't even comprehend that it was blood. Like, I was like, "It's still amniotic fluid," and just somehow, some way, some blood got mixed in.
Sure.
But we're driving to the we called the doctor that we're on our way, and we told them, like, "Hey, yeah, my wife broke her water, and she, has some bleeding." And they were like, "Oh, that's weird. Yeah, you should definitely come in." But they were so casual about it that I was, like, slow, kind of, like, packing my
Oh
things.
gosh.
Like, I was like, "Okay, I think we still have some time." And then I was trying to time contractions on the way to the hospital, and you can't with a placental abruption. Anyone who's had one knows, like, you can't time them. It's just like you don't have contractions. You're just I don't know. I don't even know what's going on. But I couldn't time them. It was just like one long miserable contraction the whole drive, and I was losing so much blood. Anyway, long story short, by the time we got to the hospital, they checked and they were like, they like felt around and they were like, "Oh, your amniotic sac is still intact. Your water didn't break." And I remember distinctly in that moment, I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna die right
Oh
now."
my
Because it occurred to me that it was blood that I had lost. And I was like, just the sheer amount that I had lost, like knowing it was all blood, like, this is it. It's over. So immediately they were like, "We're rushing her into emergency C-section." I was like fully under. And so yeah, I had my daughter, like I was out for all of it. My husband was in another room, but I literally, like, thought when they were, like, putting me under, I was like, "Okay, this is it, like, I'm dying now." And so anyway, I ended up waking up later and I had, like, 3 blood transfusions. My daughter Scarlett, when she was born, I guess that I was out for this, but she wasn't breathing at all, and, because she had lost, like, the placenta was just gone, so they don't know how long in total from when my placenta ruptured to the emergency C-section, it was just under an hour, like 52 minutes. So they don't know how long she went without, like, oxygen, but they resuscitated her, and then she was in the NICU for only 6 days in her case. But, yeah, I had a very hard birth with that one too, and my recovery was just, like, brutal. I was on so many iron supplements. I don't think I got color back in my face for, like, 2
Yeah.
months. I was so weak. And when I started my podcast, it was 6 weeks postpartum with her, and I
Wow.
just don't know what it was, but I felt this, like my girls would, like, go to bed at night, and I would literally just, like, go into my closet and, like, throw a blanket over me and my, like, microphone that I ordered on Amazon just to, like, muffle the sound, and the house would just be, like, dark and quiet. My husband would be, like, working in the other room, and I just, like, started talking just about hosting, and I literally, Katie, I couldn't tell you why I thought at this season in my life it was, like, a good idea to do this. Um, but somehow I just felt like I needed an outlet or
Yeah.
something,
It was
and
almost
so,
therapy,
yeah,
it
that's
sounds like for you.
I think it
Or
was
maybe just
therapy,
trying
yeah,
to bring back normalcy into your life after, like,
maybe.
the craziest situation.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe I just, like, needed a distraction, so I started it, and I didn't have guests on for the first, like, handful of episodes. I thought it was gonna be a solo show and just me talking, and then slowly I was like, "Okay, I think I wanna bring some guests in," and then I got a little more formal. I wasn't recording, like, in a robe under a blanket anymore, um, so I had to, start looking presentable on Zoom and everything with guests. But, yeah, slowly the show just kind of, like, took off, and Will, I met him at a conference when I was 10 episodes into the show, so it was very new,
Wow.
and I had never pictured that it could be, like, monetized or anything like that, but I met Will at a conference when the show was about 10 episodes in, and people were like, "You have to go meet Will, you have a podcast," and he has a podcast network, and then talking to him, he starts looking at the downloads, and he, like, pulled it up on this, like, app he uses to check, like, where a show is ranked, and he was like, "It shows that your show is in the top 3% of podcasts worldwide." And I was like, "No, that's wrong, like, I only have 10 episodes." And he's like, "No, look, this is it." And at that point, I was like, "Okay, if I've done that with, like, the little effort I've put
With a
in
robe in
and
a
just the 10
closet.
episodes," literally, I was like, "I have to, like, just see this through and keep going." And then, yeah, within the first year, it grew, and it's now in top 1% of shows worldwide, so
It's amazing.
I'm really proud of that, and, over time, I don't do as many solo episodes now. I really enjoy having guests and having conversations, so I pretty much bring on a guest for almost every episode at this point, and yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
You did. I'm always just so impressed by people who have an idea and then do it. Like, how did you know how to have a microphone or where to record or how to upload onto the platforms? Like, if I didn't have Will and Kelsey and his incredible team,
Actually,
it would be me on the phone with you right now
Katie
having this conversation and no one else would ever hear it.
Katie, do you know how Kelsey came to work? Hi, Kelsey, if you're listening to this.
I do.
Kel
Everybody who's listening, Kelsey is my incredible producer and
Yeah, so Kelsey, you guys, is one of my best friends from college, one of my dearest friends. She is, the godmother to my son, Grayson, and she had a podcast when she was in college, and so when I decided I wanted to start this, I was like, "Let me just hit her up." She's the only person in my life who I know has done this. So I was like, "Wanna be my editor and producer?" And so she's the one who walked me through, like she's like, "Get this microphone, start recording here, send me the file in this format, and I'll take care of the rest." So I
did
worked with
she
her.
suggest the robe that you put over your head, or was that your own
That was
decision?
me. That was just me, like, muffling. You know what? I think that that was less to muffle sound and more that I didn't want, like, my husband to hear me because I just felt like, "What am I
Wow.
doing?" Like, I was, like, so embarrassed.
And when you started it, you weren't like, "This is gonna, lead to X, like this is going to take me to the next
No.
step, or this is going to get me more
No,
co-hosting
actually,
clients. You were just like,
this was my intention with it, is I was like basically, I was getting the same questions all the time on Instagram. People were like, "Hey, what's your thought on
mm,
cancellation policies? Hey, how are you doing pricing? How do you recommend you stage a listing? Whatever." And I was like, "Okay, I'm getting the same questions and answering it." So I had mapped out 12 episodes, and they were all on a different like fundamental topic of hosting, and I was like, perfect, this is 12 episodes. I'm going to record these 12, and then anytime anyone DMs me a question, I'm just going to be like, episode 7, here you go, like episode
yeah,
3 right here. That was the entire point. So honestly, if I had not met Will when I was 10 weeks in, I was on track to end the show at week 12. Like I was almost done with my like 12 weeks I wanted to do. But then when I saw the numbers and he like hyped me up, I was like, okay, I can't stop. So I did the 12 and then
yeah,
it just kept going after that. But that was the intention. I never thought I would monetize it. It was literally just going to be like 12 nuggets of information that I can share so I don't have to
yeah.
answer questions.
Well, I, for one, am very glad that you kept going.
Thank you.
Um, I would imagine the podcast is in some way, shape, or form responsible for meeting Tatiana Taylor Tate, your partner of Level Up Your
Yeah.
Listing. Tell us about, I guess, how you guys met. She's an award-winning designer, I know, and you guys co-created Level Up Your Listing Summit together. This year is going to be the third year that it's happening. As you mentioned, I am so beyond honored to be a speaker at this incredible event. So tell me more about the summit, why you started, and really what the goal of it is.
Yes. So Tatiana is my partner who she's based in Vancouver and Canada, and then I'm in Southern California. So we always laugh calling each other's international business partner, which I just feel like sounds so fancy. But how I connected with Tatiana was through Instagram. She was going to a conference, the same conference I met Will at, and she was going there with a whole group of, STR people in the space. And we had been following each other and kind of DMing back and forth for a bit. And then, like 2 weeks before that conference, she was like, "Hey, a spot in our group just opened up. Like, would you want to come and stay with us?" So it was the first conference ever of this type I had like been to, but I was asking my husband, like, "You think I could go?" So we had 2 daughters at this point. Yeah, this was like June of 2022, and I had my
Oh,
middle child with the whole traumatic thing in March of 2022. So it was like 3 months postpartum at this point, something like that.
yeah.
And yeah, I was like, "Can I go to this? Like, you'll have to hold down the fort, but I just really feel like I need to be there and like get more involved in this space." And I'm so happy I went. So met Tatiana in person. We just stayed together and shared a room and everything. But it was like totally felt like we had like known each other forever. I met Will there, and you guys just heard that story. And basically, my life truly changed so much from that conference and the connections I made. And when we both came home, Tatiana and I stayed in touch and started talking. And we were just like, you know what? We both loved the conference so much. We need to do our own. And I think we both recognized like there's a need to do a very intentionally like designed a more hospitality driven conference. So anyone who's attended a conference in our industry, you've probably seen, "I've got 100 doors," like when you're networking, like it's very much that conversation. "I scaled to a portfolio of 10 million in 2 years." Like it's all about that. And we felt at these other conferences like, the real question that I want to know is, how are you finding like a reliable cleaner, and what are the conversations you're having with them? When your cleaner's not meeting expectations, how are you having that conversation? Like that's what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
And those conversations just weren't happening. So that's really what we wanted to do, is just create like a safe space of a conference where like these real questions can come about. If anyone, I want to talk specifically to like I know we hate the term avatar, but I want to talk specifically for 1 second to the avatar that we really created this event for. I've been to so many conferences where I will see a husband and wife who does real estate investing together. And I'll see that the guy is pulled into a conversation, and all these people are like, "Oh yeah, how do you run numbers? Yada yada yada. How are you scaling up?" And I'll see that the wife is just standing there. And there's been dozens of instances where I go up to the wife and I'm like, "So what do you do in the business? Like everyone's talking to your spouse, but what do you do?" And I hear this every time, Katie. "Oh, he's the one that does the whole thing. Like he's the one that like finds the deals and underwrites them and invests and gets the cash flow and pulls the investors and analyzes the deal. The only thing that I do is stage the property, set it up, design it, photograph it, message the guests. I'm on call 24/7, handle all the maintenance requests, restock the unit, schedule the cleaners, train the cleaners. And by the time they're done, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's all you do. You
Yeah.
don't do anything. Like,
You're useless to the business,
yeah,
clearly.
I'm like, "You literally," and this is, like, I think that that was, like, heartbreaking to me, and I've heard this so many times that I'm like, "Do you realize if not for you, he would not be able to keep investing over here? Like,
Right.
you are the glue that even makes these listings profitable. The reason he's able to continue investing at this pace is because of you, and
Yeah.
if you weren't in the picture, he'd be paying 25 bucks minimum to a property manager to do this. Like, you are essential in the cash flow role. You are not just helping schedule cleaners. You are COO. You are
Yeah.
chief operations officer. You oversee the whole thing, and that really was the avatar that we created this summit for, is like the woman who just feels like she goes to these conferences as the plus one and doesn't have anything to contribute. Like, this is the space I want you to go to and like own it. You can bring your spouse if you want. We do always say that we are open to men as well, but I want men to attend who are like gonna come and like ask questions about hospitality and guest experience, and that's what they care about.
Right.
Operations, like day to day struggles. If you just want to come and brag about your portfolio size, like there's 20 other conferences you can attend.
And you guys have not only incorporated really that focus on hospitality, not only in the agenda, but I think also in how you put the conference on, which is very different from a lot of the conferences we see in our industry.
Yeah, yeah, and that was one thing too that drove Tatiana is an award-winning interior designer, and she's so immensely talented. You guys have to check out her work. But both of us, I'm not a designer, but I think I just have, I don't know, kind of like an innate eye for design, and like I recognize good design when I see it. And both of us were kind of like, huh, we've been to a lot of conferences where everyone talks on stage about how important design and niching yourself is, but we are in a stuffy hotel ballroom, and, all the sponsor booths are just 6-foot long plastic tables with, like, black tablecloths over them. Like, where is this, like, design that everybody's, like, talking about is so important? Like, I don't see that in this room. So, I think that that was a big, impetus for us to be like, "Okay, let's actually put our money where our mouth is and, like, host an event that is reflective of what hosts should be putting out there." So, if you guys go look at, like, the gallery of our photos and stuff, and just the branding on our site, you will see, like, we every detail of this summit, like, we've thought through. I tell Tatiana, this is more work than planning my wedding was. Like, we do, like, branded cocktail napkins. Like, we just yesterday were ordering custom drink stirrers and edible glitter for, like, our signature drinks. Like, we go through everything, our stage design, all of our sponsor booths we do in-house. So our sponsors, we like take over their booth design for them, and we custom create like installations and activations with every single sponsor. So it's very, very immersive. Our swag is so cute. Our merch is so cute. Like, every detail we just obsess over, kind of unhealthily, if I'm being honest.
Well, I'm super excited to attend. And I think, kind of as you touched on when you first met Tatiana, when you first met Will, there is really nothing that can replace being in person together.
Yeah.
But something that I've been really fascinated to watch you and Tatiana do as well is you've kind of expanded Level Up Your Listing, at least from how I understand it, with a digital footprint now. The Long Weekend Society, described as an exclusive members only community for savvy real estate investors, short term rental hosts, interior designers, and hospitality entrepreneurs. So, was that the intention of launching that? Was kind of like, level up your listings only 3 days. Let's make sure that we can keep the conversation going year round.
Yeah, yeah, that was it exactly. So, yeah, we now have an online digital membership that you can join if you can't attend the summit, of course, but I think it's the perfect supplement to attending and just a way to keep in touch with everyone that you've met. But we have tons of master classes. You've contributed an amazing master class in there, Katie. And yeah, so we've got tons of resources and stuff in there, a whole resource vault and master classes, the community, and anyone in our membership gets 10% off events, including the summit. But really, yeah, that was born out of we put so much work into this 3-day event, and I'm like, "Great, now what do we do for the other 362 days of the year until we see you guys again?"
Yeah.
Like, we wanna keep in touch, so we do a lot of, like, monthly webinars in there, and it's just a very supportive group.
You've seen hosting change from 2017 till now. Now you've seen really the evolution of conferences with what you guys have created and then adding that digital footprint as well. Do you have any predictions for the future of short-term rentals or Airbnb hosting overall?
Yeah, okay, I have 2, and they're gonna seem like they contradict each other, but I promise they both, make sense. So, one is we are seeing people are adding, more amenities. I think right now, specifically, wellness is a really big trend. Cold plunges, saunas, red light therapy, anything along that lens, like, wellness retreats is gonna be huge. I think glamping and, like, using nature more, tree houses, all of that I definitely see coming in. What I wanna say that might sound like a contradiction is I also think a huge trend, if we can call it a trend, but a huge thing that hosts should spend time on this year is, like, cleanliness standards and just simplifying, like, checkout procedures and check-in procedures and just make it so easy for your guests to stay with you. Like, stop requiring all of the, like, jumping through hoops and, like, background checks to get people to come. Like, I don't I understand, I know people are gonna push back and say we have to protect ourselves. I know, I don't want you to be stupid, but I also think that there's, like, a point where it's just not fun to book a short-term rental
Mhm.
all the time. Like, it's easier to book a hotel. Like, I don't get questioned about, like, why I'm coming and who I'm bringing with me and how many pounds my dog weighs. Like, it's just not fun to book anymore, and so I do think that there's just gonna be a very I think, like, one of the biggest ways you can stand out, like, upcoming is just, like, make it easy for people to stay with you.
Yeah.
Have it be clean, have it be comfortable, like, make sure your mattresses are comfortable and have clean bedding. Like, if you do that alone, you are already in the 90th percentile of hosts. But then I think really if you are a new investor and you want to, like, go into new asset classes and do something creative, I see that the trend is, like, more nature-based experiences and more wellness.
That's great advice. Natalie, I want to close by asking you the three questions that I ask everyone. And the first is, what was the best hospitality experience you've ever had?
Oh, this for me was my dad, he's retired now, but he was a computer programmer, and so growing up, he would get sent to China and, like, Taiwan all the time for business trips, Singapore, like, always East Asia he was working in, and there was one time, I think I was, like, 11, and they wanted to send him to work over the American Thanksgiving, and they're like, "There's no such thing as Thanksgiving in, like, Taiwan, we want you there."
Right.
So, they were gonna send him, and he pushed back and said, "Okay, I will only go if you guys pay the company pays for my wife and kids to come too." And they did. So, our whole family ended up spending American Thanksgiving in Taiwan one year, and this hotel, I will never forget it. It was called the One Hotel. I believe they're a chain. Okay. It was the nicest hotel I've ever been to in my entire life, and they had a lot of American, like, business travelers there, and they made an entire, like, American Thanksgiving buffet and, like, spread, on that Thursday, and it was so good, and it was, like, I remember I was such a, like, oh god, I was, like, such a little brat at this age because looking back now, I'm like, I got to go to Taiwan when I was 11, like, that's so cool, all expense paid trip, but at the time, I remember being like, "Mom, Dad, like, I wanna stay home for Thanksgiving, like, it's tradition, like, I don't wanna go," and I was so pouty about it, but honestly, seeing that they said that they were gonna have this, like, Thanksgiving buffet, and I was like, it's not gonna feel like home, it's gonna
Mm.
be, like, Asian food mixed in, which I love Asian food, but I just wanted, like, my sweet potato casserole and, like, green beans and turkey, and it was perfect, like, it was so good, it was, like, so homey, the food was just amazing, and I remember, like, as an 11-year-old that was, like, I don't know. I just like that's exactly what I needed, and it completely for the rest of the week we were there, like, I was so happy. I ate all the Asian food, like, it was amazing, but I think I just, like, needed that, and it was such a thoughtful gesture that they even were like, "We recognize, like, we have a lot of American clients, this is a big holiday over there," and they, I don't know, accommodated for it. It was really cool.
And here you are still talking about it, so
Oh my gosh,
proving.
20 years later, I'm
Yeah.
31 now, so and I still remember that.
And on the opposite side of that one, what was the worst hospitality experience you've ever had?
Hmm. I feel like I would have blocked it out. Let's see what's the worst one. Um Oh, okay, I know this one. This was another time actually that my dad had a business trip. This time was to Finland, and I was able to go with him on this one. And I remember we got out of the train station really late. It was like 11 p.m. at night, and we had booked this like little boutique hostel or hotel or something, and we could not find it. Like to save our lives, it was just so dark out. It was so cold. We were like going all around the city and stuff with luggage and everything. And I mean, I think we were walking around for like almost 2 hours, and I was, I don't know, 14 or something at the time, and I was, like, so tired by the end of it and so over it, and when we finally found it, the hotel was amazing and super cute and everything it lived up to be, but I think knowing that, like, I just think it would've been so helpful to be like, "Hey, what time are you guys actually getting in? Here are very clear instructions, like, where are you arriving from? The train station, perfect, like, here's how to find our place." So, I mean, it's nothing on the hotel's fault, like, they can't control the weather and the streets being navigated, but I think it was just, like, a very like, when we arrived, it was like, that could have been easier.
Yeah. And it dampened your experience before you even walked through the doors.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
final question for you. What does hospitality mean to you? And is there anyone, a person, a brand that you think has truly mastered it?
Okay, I'm gonna throw out a brand, kinda random, they're not, a hotel or a short-term rental or
Okay.
anything, but you know who I really think has killed it with hospitality is Nordstrom.
Hmm.
I just always for me, that is, like, the place I just go, like, in this whole world right now where I'm online shopping constantly and everyone is, Nordstrom is still, like, the one place. I will Instacart so many things, I have recurring deliveries with so many things, but that is still the one store that I just like to go to, and, like, when I need, like, me time or I'm stressed, it's like, "Babe, watch the kids," like, I'm going, I will sit at the Nordstrom cafe, I will bring a book, and I will just, like, walk around even if I don't even buy anything, but that for me has just always been, like, I don't know, it's the staff is so helpful, like yeah, so kind of a random example, I know they're not a hotel, but I think they've really
No,
done a
it's
good
great.
job, like, as things are changing and everything is moving online, that's still the one place where, like, I love the dressing room experience and the staff is always so helpful. Like, that's one place I will always shop in person.
Well, Natalie, it's been so much fun getting to chat with you. I can't wait to see you in person in a couple of months now. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie. Yeah, we can't wait to have you at the summit. And for anyone listening, Katie, I know I have a promo code for you. Are you able to link that in the show notes?
Yep,
So
we'll link that in the show
perfect.
notes. You'll get 10% off if you want to get tickets to Level Up Your Listing Summit. And I'm not just saying this because you'll see me there, but I am really excited for the content personally myself. So I'm sure you won't be disappointed if you choose to join us.
Yay. Thank you, Katie. And those dates are March 9th, 10th, and 11th in Phoenix, Arizona.
Thanks, Natalie. All right, everyone, it's time for today's sweet summary where I write down the key insights and actionable takeaways from today's conversation. Natalie has been such an inspiration to me since I started hosting our first short term rental. And I hope after this conversation, it's easy to see why. She has an incredible ability to simplify seemingly complex tasks or topics and make them approachable, relatable, and practical. For example, when we were talking about why short term rental hosts may not want to go all in on one platform due to the fear of their listing being suspended, she simply pointed out that if that happened, it wouldn't make your other sites start producing out of nowhere. She has a habit of sharing these almost light bulb moment insights, something so obvious that we're unsure how we missed it in the first place. I love her focus on hospitality in everything she does, whether it be taking care of her guests that are staying in her properties, handholding the members of her mentorship program to ensure they find success, or designing a new kind of conference with hospitality driven short term rental hosts like herself at its core. Before we started recording, she told me how they even have pumping rooms for new moms at Level Up Your Listing and a place for them to store their milk while they're in attendance. Yet again, it feels like something so obvious, yet I've never seen that at a conference before. One of the biggest aha moments for me during our conversation was when she shared how she originally felt embarrassed that her parents' property in Big Bear, California was a condo, not a cute A frame like she assumed everyone wanted. But once she realized what her property offered that those cute A-frames don't, it allowed her to lean into those qualities, to highlight them, to celebrate them. And the results speak for themselves, doubling her revenue in her second year and doubling it again in her third. Overall, Natalie's story showcases the incredible things that can happen when we listen to our gut. It was her gut instinct that first told her to list her parents' property on Airbnb and what would and wouldn't work in that listing. That same instinct told her to get in a closet, hide under a robe, and launch her podcast when she was only 6 weeks postpartum. It convinced her to go to that fateful conference where she met Will Slickers, CEO and founder of Hospitality.fm, who encouraged her to keep going with the podcast, and where she met Tatiana Taylor Tate, who became her her international business partner. It's a true testament to the power of trusting your instincts and a fantastic reminder that hospitality is about more than just accommodations. It's about creating spaces where people feel seen, valued, and cared for. And that concludes another episode of Sweet Success. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, rate, and review the show. We all know how important those 5-star reviews are. I also want to say a massive thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in. It means the absolute world to me. And I'd love to hear from you. If you have ideas for future guests, new topics to cover, or even just want to say hi, don't be shy. Message me through our website, sweetsuccesspodcast.com, or on social media at Sweet Success Podcast. That's sweet like hotel suite. Once again, I'm your host, Katie Klein, and I'm super excited to see you all next week.